context of the various conferences of the parties to the United Nations Framework Agreement on Climate Change, Convention on Climate Change, and the energy transition. It is time, on the one hand, to put an end to the selective implementation of commitments made by polluters, and on the other hand, to compensate, in the name of climate justice, the efforts made by less polluting countries, including those in Africa, to preserve the environment in the interests of our entire planet. As for the energy transition, Africa has a sufficient wealth of renewable energy sources and raw materials which could help mobilize credible alternatives to the double energy and environmental crisis. From this point of view, it is important to note that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is among the primary producers of essential strategic minerals for the energy transition and for decarbonization in the transport sector, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, and manganese. My country has set itself the goal of producing these precious metals cleanly to this end. And it is with this in mind that the Republic of Zambia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, on the 29th of April, signed an agreement on the establishment of a value chain in the electric battery and clean energy sector. It goes without saying, given the importance of the size of the investments required by the implementation of such a project, that the involvement of partners is particularly essential, particularly in terms of providing capital and appropriate technologies. What's more, in order to support the green transformation program of economies on the African continent and to meet the growing energy demand around the world, my country has chosen to make the most of its vast potential in renewable energy sources, including hydroelectricity, solar energy, geothermal energy, and the exploitation of its gas deposits. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is an asset when it comes to implementing the 2063 agenda of the African Union through the implementation of the Grand Inga project, which could also be beneficial for part of Europe and the Middle East. It is with this in mind that we are delighted to host the preparatory work for the 27th Conference of the Parties, pre-COP27, which will take place in Kinshasa next month. Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity to shed some light on the environmental aspect of the tender launched on the 28th of July by my country for the exploration of 27 oil deposits and 3 gas deposits, a call which has been unhelpfully criticized in the international arena. Here, it is worth recalling that no relevant international legal instrument ratified by the Democratic Republic of the Congo prohibits it from exploiting its natural resources for reasons of protecting the environment or for fear of aggravating global warming. Next, the 2015 Paris Agreement recognizes that developing countries have the right to emit CO2 for their development while taking precautions for the global climate through their nationally determined contributions. The government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has thus set itself the goal of exploiting the country's natural resources while respecting environmental standards and processing them locally to provide extra added value and to boost the national economy, including by creating liquid wealth, cash and jobs to improve the living conditions of the Congolese population. The appropriate strategies and measures have been adopted to avoid negative impacts on the environment. Like other countries in Africa and Europe that have overcome this challenge, they involve effective government checks and balances. For the Democratic Republic of the Congo, it is a question of achieving its economic and social goals whilst also preserving its forests and continuing to be a solution country when it comes to the fight against global warming. My country remains open to cooperation with any partner that would like to help it achieve its goals. On the economic front, what needs to be done is to help economies recover, the economies of countries that have been weakened by the collateral effects of climate change and the coronavirus, to promote balanced global economic growth and to halt the exacerbation of poverty in developing countries. We cannot overcome this challenge without internal good governance efforts at the national level, nor productive investments of capital, nor without real and sufficient transfers of financial resources to those who need them. For that reason, the Democratic Republic of the Congo calls for the proposal for rich countries to cede a percentage of their special drawing rights at the International Monetary Fund to less well-off countries to be fleshed out. This was a proposal made by the Paris Conference on the relaunch of economies post-COVID-19 in May 2021. It was supported by a firm commitment from the G20 summit in October 2021 in Rome. In any case, any facility for access to additional resources for those countries sorely tested by climate change and COVID-19 would be welcome. Similarly, alleviating the debt burden of low-income countries must continue to be a constant concern, which should be included in a global approach of international solidarity. For its part, despite the difficult global economic situation following the harmful effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has made remarkable progress in economic growth. Wealth creation accelerated in 2021, particularly thanks to the dynamism of the mining sector. Production growth in that sector went from 1% in 2019 to 10.1% in 2021, following the good price of copper and cobalt on the international markets. Inflation and the exchange rate of the Congolese franc have remained relatively stable. The Administrative Board of the International Monetary Fund therefore concluded favorably the second review of the program supported by the Extended Credit Facility. The IMF expressed its satisfaction with the prudent macroeconomic policies adopted by the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We will tirelessly continue these policies and the effort to improve the business climate, which is currently underway, to promote private investment and to promote economic activities in general. Mr. President, solidarity and justice in relations between nations have always been factors in mutual peace and security because they bring people together and create links of interdependence between them. Therefore, the fight against poverty and promoting collective well-being are powerful sources that we can draw on to combat social conflicts and tensions between peoples. For that reason, the DRC welcomes the collective action of the international community against COVID-19 and commends the initiative of the United States of America, New Feed the Future, to finance agriculture in order to combat hunger and food insecurity in Africa following the Russo-Ukrainian crisis. And my country, the DRC, is among those African beneficiary countries. Just to mention these most recent cases, my country calls for similar actions and initiatives which not only help resolve problems of surviving on a daily basis and help create accessible jobs for a large number of people, but also help distribute incomes and purchasing power. However, in the name of international solidarity and justice, we do have questions over the maintenance of sanctions against the people of Zimbabwe. These are sanctions which, what's more, date back to the era of the late President Robert Mugabe. Why is our organization so silent and so indifferent to this injustice, almost a crime against an innocent people? As the current president of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, I firmly call upon the United Nations to do everything possible to achieve the immediate lifting of sanctions against the Republic of Zimbabwe and its people. Mr. President, in this multipolar world, no country, however powerful and rich they are, can aim to overcome the challenges that I have just mentioned alone, let alone overcome them in the interests of everyone. The importance of what is at stake, the complexity of the problems that need to be resolved, and the scale of the task require an equitable multilateral approach which includes the interests of each and everyone and which pools the energy of everyone in a climate of mutual respect. For that reason, the Democratic Republic of the Congo continues to think that it is essential that we better structure multilateralism and enrich it with equal treatment for all of the parties involved in order to create spaces for dialogue and cooperation, which is something that we need in order to ensure international peace and security. That is the United Nations that we want. To do this, we need to act urgently to reform the UN, which seems to be lagging somewhat at the moment. In this context, I would like to stress the need to satisfy the legitimate and just claim of Africa to be represented on the UN Security Council with 2 additional seats in the category of the non-permanent members and 2 others from among the permanent members with the same rights, including the veto, the same privileges and obligations of the current permanent members. This is a question of justice that needs to be done to a continent, or indeed to an entire swath of humanity, whose role continues to grow with each day that passes in the conduct of international affairs. We Africans are firmly attached to that. Mr. President of the United Nations General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, heads of delegation, to conclude, allow me to say a few words about gender equality. There is a need here to stress the need to continue current efforts at the international level and within states to create spaces of gender equality and opportunities for liberty and action for women. In order to do this, the involvement of men in gender-forward policies is necessary because, on the one hand, men share their lives with women, and on the other hand, since time immemorial, for various reasons, men have established a preeminence over women, which gives them a determining influence over the destiny, the fate of women. We must bring an end to this de facto situation. That is why, during my term at the head of the African Union, I initiated a meeting of heads of state and government of the Continental Organization under the subject Conference of Men on Positive Masculinity. This historic meeting, held in Kinshasa in 2021, led to an African Union declaration containing commitments of men, including heads of state and government, to put an end to violence against women and girls and to provide appropriate responses to this issue. This declaration constitutes a veritable African Union Charter for women, which I am working hard to make a reality as in my role as African Union champion for positive masculinity. It's in this context that I have decided to further promote the Congolese woman, who today increasingly occupies the foreground in the management of public affairs within political, legal and administrative institutions in my country. This proactive policy should in the future allow for radical change, not only a change in the perception of women and the role of women in society, but also in women taking charge of their own destinies. Because equality is not a gift given to women, but rather a responsibility that they must shoulder. I wish every success to the work of the 77th session of the General Assembly. Thank you.
En nombre de la Asamblea, deseo agradecer al presidente de la República Democrática del Congo.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadéra, Head of State of the Central African Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
En nombre de la Asamblea General,
on behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Mr. Faustin Archange Touadéra, Head of State of the Central African Republic, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. As I take the floor on behalf of the Central African Republic at the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly, I would first of all like to congratulate Mr. Shaba Koroshi for his brilliant election as president of our session. Your flawless knowledge of the international arena, as well as your substantial personal qualities, are an asset and a guarantee of the success of our work, and undeniably constitute a source of pride for Hungary, your beautiful country. I would also like to commend the excellent work done and the results achieved by Mr. Abdullah Shahid during the 76th session. I reiterate my gratitude to Mr. Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General, for his sustained commitment to international peace and security, and for the United Nations' constant support for my country. Allow me to pay a sincere tribute to Her Majesty Elizabeth II, Queen of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth Realms, a true icon of peace who, during the 7 decades of her reign, was able to maintain excellent relations of friendship and cooperation between the United Kingdom and the countries of the Commonwealth and Africa, and in particular with the Central African Republic. Mr. President, the 77th session of our Assembly convened around the theme A Watershed Moment, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges, provides a solemn opportunity to consider the challenges that we share, which are serious causes of concern for the future of humanity. More than ever, the question of security, peace, the environment, and health are entering a phase which is critical. However, the warning signs are being ignored in favor of economic, geopolitical, and geostrategic interests. Mr. President, is not the role of the United Nations to transform the world, to make it more just and more secure, and to ensure the dignity of each and every one of us, regardless of the global context? Because, indeed, the many hotbeds of tension and crisis around the world tug on our collective conscience and also show us that our organization is the product of a bygone era. For that reason, the Central African Republic reiterates its support for the common position of the African Union, which calls for profound reform of the United Nations and the expansion of the seats of members of the Security Council to ensure the more just, more representative participation of all continents. Mr. President, the protection of the environment, that is to say, protecting the place where we live, is one of the interlocking challenges that we must absolutely overcome. It is time for the biggest polluters to honor their commitments, in particular the implementation of the Paris Agreement, as well as international solidarity for climate justice with respect to the most vulnerable populations. Mr. President, COVID-19 has taught us that global public health is an imperative for all nations without exception. My country welcomes the paradigm shift that is taking place in the health sector and the unprecedented momentum of solidarity accompanying that paradigm shift, including access to vaccines for polio, COVID-19, and soon a vaccine for malaria. It's thus with pride that my country achieved the status of a polio-free country and has vaccinated 50% of its national target population against COVID-19. I commend and encourage the Health Emergency Preparedness Initiative implemented by the World Health Organization. The Central African Republic is proud to be the instigator of it and to be the first pilot country which is helping to tangibly improve our ability to manage epidemics. Mr. President, the Central African Republic has seen its march towards development slowed in recent years by serious security and public health crises, which have been exacerbated by a persistent lack of financial support from the international community, leading to the disruption of agriculture, forestry, and mining outputs. As a fragile state, facing food insecurity and a glaring shortage of material and human resources, the Central African Republic continues to make enormous sacrifices to improve its macroeconomic management and its fiscal governance. With the support of its partners, my country has been able to implement ambitious reforms to strengthen the mobilization of revenues and optimize public spending. My country expects the re-establishment of the extended credit facility, which was suspended by the International Monetary Fund, in order to help boost domestic resources to address the lack of budgetary support from technical and financial partners and the digitalization of small tax revenue collection. Areas of solutions still need to be explored through regional and international mechanisms in a spirit of interdependence in order to overcome the following challenges: developing physical infrastructure, transport, energy, water, education and health through the implementation of adapted programs and the mobilization of financing through public-private partnerships. The challenge of access to capital markets for the financing of development projects through public-private partnerships, the development and coordination of trade policies and economic relations with other regions, the challenge of supporting the education system through the training of trainers and the creation of professional training centers, the development of a resilient economy that is able to resist internal and external shocks by diversifying the economy and using new technologies, the challenge of developing innovative financing mechanisms targeting both agriculture and the climate in order to improve access to the necessary financial capital to develop the agro-pastoral sector, and the challenge of promoting smart solutions and approaches to climate change, which are adapted to the national context. Mr. President, the Central African Republic was the first country in Africa to adopt Bitcoin as a reference currency and digital payment system, and the first country in the world to unanimously adopt a law regulating cryptocurrencies. This ambitious and innovative initiative represents an enormous opportunity to reposition the economy, to improve prospects, and to change the destiny of the people of the Central African Republic at this time when we need to open up to new horizons and solutions that go beyond what is conventional. Mr. President, it is an established fact that the Central African Republic is contributing to finding transformative solutions to interlocking challenges with more engagement and conviction. In this respect, several bold reforms and initiatives have been undertaken with the support of international partners in order to strengthen the rule of law and restore the authority of the state across the country's territory. What's more, the courageous measures taken by the government to combat impunity, the implementation of the political agreement for peace and reconciliation of the 6th of February 2019, and the Luanda Joint Roadmap, as well as the recommendations from the Republican Dialogue, have helped reduce tensions and build confidence in the national socio-political climate. The Central African Republic is faithful to its international commitments and abolished the death penalty on the 1st of June 2022. On the 31st of August, it adopted a law on countering the trafficking of persons and a child protection code. Mr. President, it is with particular interest that I took note of the firm condemnation by the Security Council in its resolution 2648 2022 of the 29th of July 2022 of attacks perpetrated against peaceful civilian populations by armed groups. I also note with satisfaction the Council's position against transnational trafficking networks, which continue to supply armed groups with weapons of all sorts. I welcome the significant progress which allowed for a substantial lifting of the arms embargo imposed on our defense and security forces, and I would like to pass on the gratitude of the people of the Central African Republic to all friendly and fraternal countries which firmly support our request for a complete and total lifting of the embargo. I do, however, deplore the maneuvering which aims to legitimize armed groups and insidiously to maintain the embargo. Who stands to benefit from this crime? Mr. President, the Central African Republic has suffered a great deal from miscalculations and disinformation, something which has gone on for, unfortunately, far too long. The young people of the Central African Republic are an elite in waiting. They need only peace and security to develop their country. I wish to denounce the disinformation and manipulation campaigns which aim to discredit and then to forcibly destabilize the democratic institutions of the Central African Republic. These campaigns, conducted by certain international media outlets against a backdrop of vague and threatening neocolonialism, the success of which is due less to their truthfulness and more to their tried and tested rhetoric, are motivated solely by the desire to preserve the geostrategic and geopolitical interests of some states far from the vital interests of the Central African Republic's people. The Central African Republic calls for a relationship of trust and mutual respect with its partners. We are always ready to cooperate with every country in the world, provided that its vital interests and our sovereignty are respected. I therefore wish us every success in our work. Long live international solidarity. Thank you.
En nombre de la Asamblea,
on behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Head of State of the Central African Republic for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by the President of my country, His Excellency Nayib Armando Bukele, President of the Republic of El Salvador. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Nayib Armando Bukele, President of the Republic of El Salvador, and to invite him to address this Assembly. Madam President of the General Assembly, my compatriot and ambassador to the United Nations, Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, distinguished members of different delegations, my wife Gabriela and my daughter Ayla, ladies and gentlemen, and principally to the peoples of all of the countries of the world. I bring you the greetings from the land of surf, volcanoes, coffee, peace, Bitcoin, and freedom. Almost all of this list is easy to verify. Any visitors to El Salvador will find the best surfing beaches in the world, volcanoes all over the place, incredible coffee. You'll be able to walk easily and peacefully around the whole country. And, in particular, they will find a united people fighting for its freedom. And that is exactly what I have come to talk about from this podium in the United Nations General Assembly. I've come here to talk about freedom. The freedom yearned for by my people and yearned for by all peoples of the world. The thing is, freedom is a country that is so easy to say, but it requires struggle, perseverance, and numerous sacrifices to become a reality. The freedom to choose where we're going and how we want to go there. The freedom to set our course as human beings. But being free, as much that defines it, depends on how we are seen by others, but above all, how we see ourselves. Therefore, in addition to deciding that we want to be free, it's an indispensable requirement for the powerful to respect our freedom. I come from a people that, for a long time, saw itself as less than others. I come from a people where we had never had the courage to take our own decisions. I come from a people where our fate was always controlled by others. I come from a people that is only the master of the smallest country on the American continent. And even this little dominion over this small parcel of land, barely visible on the map, is not respected by countries that have a great deal more territory than us, much more money, much more power, and that think correctly that they are the masters of their country, but they think incorrectly that they are also the masters of ours. And the thing is, a group of powerful countries not only has a great deal more than all the others, but they also believe that they are the masters of the little that is possessed by those countries that are not powerful. It's as if someone were living in a very small and humble house, but they had a very, very rich neighbor with a beautiful, gigantic palace as their house, with huge swathes of land and unimaginable treasures. The person living in the small house respects and admires their neighbor. They don't bother him, even though they might be immensely richer than he is. He is happy in his little house, but he decides to improve it, to paint it, to repair it, and to update the furniture. It takes work, obviously, but he's sure that it'll be worth it. So far, so good. Until the rich neighbor decides that his poor neighbor doesn't have the right to repair his house. He doesn't have the right to buy other furniture or to paint the walls. The rich neighbor decides that he is not only the master of his own palace, but he can also give orders to the poor neighbors in his small house. And the order is that everything has to continue in poor order as it was before. Repairs are not allowed. The poor neighbor has no reason to oppose his rich neighbor. He has no reason to envy him. He doesn't need to aspire to have what the rich neighbor has. He doesn't need to purport to give orders to him in his palace or demand that he update the marble in his sitting room. But the poor neighbor must at least be able to have the right to clean his house, to repair and paint his walls, to update his furniture, plant flowers in his garden, and change the roof for one that doesn't leak and protects him from the rain. This shouldn't bother the rich neighbor. He can't demand that the poor neighbor put back the old furniture, dig up the flowers, peel off the new paint, and remove the new roof, to replace it with the old neighbor, with the old roof, which furthermore had always leaked. This rich neighbor has no authority to demand that the poor neighbor go back in time. this rich neighbor has no reason to purport to give orders in another house. And this poor neighbor has already tried to follow the orders, and it couldn't have gone worse. Also, because what the poor neighbor is doing is working for the first time. Why should his neighbor force him to return to how things were before? To what end? To achieve what? Shouldn't he be glad that his poor neighbor is just doing a little bit better than before? That's why I say that freedom is something that we're still fighting for in my country, El Salvador. Because while on paper we are free and sovereign and independent, we will not really be so until the powerful understand that we want to be their friends, that we admire them, that we respect them, that our doors are wide open to trade, for them to visit us, to build the best possible relations. But what they can't do is come to our house to give orders. Not only because it's our house, but because it makes no sense to undo what we're doing, what we're achieving. In very little time, El Salvador has moved from being the most dangerous country in the world, literally the most dangerous country in the world. It has moved from that to being on the path to becoming the safest country in America. We have moved from being a country unknown to many, and those few who knew us due to the gangs, the deaths, violence, war. We've moved from that to becoming a country known for our beaches, our surf, our volcanoes, our financial freedom, our good governance, and the fact that we brought an end to organized crime. And these achievements that are only just beginning and that have been achieved in very little time are immense for us. We have the right to continue on the path to our development. That's why I said at the beginning that freedom is something that we're still fighting for, because we still need our right to be free, to be recognized, to truly be independent. I wanted to use this podium to say these words because they might not only resonate in my country, El Salvador, but also among other peoples of the world that, just like mine, want to chart their own path with freedom. Others might have done this earlier, others might do so later. For some it might be easier, for others it will be more difficult. But it will happen much more quickly if the powerful countries help us. Or, at least, if they don't want to help us, they shouldn't block our path. Each people should find its own path, and each people will find friends in the pursuit for that path, of that path. To these countries, I humbly offer the friendship of this small country, the smallest country in the American continent, the country of surf, of volcanoes and pupusas, the country that's still fighting for its freedom, but which is on the verge of achieving it. 3 years ago, I was here, standing on this same podium at the United Nations. And at that time, I told you that this format was already obsolete. And now, 3 years later, we realize that it is all the more so. But perhaps it still serves to do something. Perhaps it serves, among many other things, to enable this representative of this small country, the smallest in the American continent, to humbly remind you that these United Nations were not created to divide, to destroy, or to subjugate, but rather to allow us to meet each other, to work together, to build a better community of countries, and to seek solutions to global problems. But with absolute respect for sovereignty, independence, and the self-determination of each country. And, as is stated in the United Nations Charter itself, in the first principle of how this organization would act, this organization is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all peoples. And as is provided in one of the main purposes for which the organization was founded, it was founded to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples. Perhaps the change from the unipolar world to a multipolar world that is so often talked about would be better if, rather than moving from having one superpower to several superpowers, we moved rather to a world in which each people is truly free to set its own course, and in which this community of nations, we all contribute, the small and the big, with our experiences and our abilities to resolving the problems facing mankind. Nobody could stand against that. But just as with freedom, it's easy to say so, but difficult to make it a reality. I came here to stand on this podium in a format in which I no longer believe, to say something which, in all likelihood, in any case, will not change the way in which powerful countries see the others. But it might change the way in which developing countries see ourselves. If, after these few words, I have achieved some of this, or at least that a handful of individuals see themselves with respect and know that they are able to chart their own path, then it was worth it coming here to speak in this obsolete format. And who knows, perhaps over time, perhaps other nations, other peoples will emerge who also decide to fight for their freedom. And then the United Nations will have become relevant once again, at least for this humble servant. Thank you very much. May God bless all nations in the world.
En nombre de la Asamblea,
on behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of El Salvador for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mr. Kishida Fumio, Prime Minister of Japan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. Excellency Kishida Fumio, Prime Minister of Japan.
Excelentísimo señor Kishida Fumio, Primer Ministro del Japón, y le invito a dirigirse a la Asamblea.
はい、議長、ご列席の皆様、今、我々は歴史的な分水嶺に立っています。国連創設から77年が経ちましたが、我々はウクライナや世界各地の惨状を目の当たりにしています。大戦の惨禍を繰り返さないと固く決心した国連の創始者は、我々が直面する国際秩序に対する挑戦を見たならば何と思うでしょうか。国連憲章の理念および原則に賛同しているからこそ、我々はこの議場に集っています。加盟国が団結して平和と安全を維持し、すべての人が経済的、社会的に発展する国際社会の実現、それこそが我々が目指す姿ではないでしょうか。支配に根付いた国際秩序が維持されることが不可欠です。国連はそうした秩序形成に中核的な役割を担ってきました。ところが現在、この国際秩序の根本が大きく揺らいでいます。ロシアのウクライナ侵略は、国連憲章の理念と原則を踏みにじる行為です。力による支配ではなく、すべての国が法の支配の下にあるのが重要であり、断じてそのようなことは許してはなりません。国連は 大国のためにあるのではない。すべての加盟国の主権平等の原則に基礎を置き、国際社会全体のためにあるのです。力を有し、声の大きな国の主張だけでなく、届きにくい、しかし正当な声を実現するために存在するのです。世界各地で既存の国際秩序が試練にさらされている今こそ、国連憲章の理念と原則に立ち戻り、国際社会における法の支配に基づく国際秩序の徹底のため、力と英知を結集する時です。そのためにどうしても実現せねばならないのが国連の改革であり、国連自身の機能強化です。コンゴ動乱の停戦調停の途上で殉職したハマーショルド事務総長は、国連書記官に欠陥があるとすれば、それを正す責任は私たちにありますと述べました。国連の掲げる理念を実現していくために、我々は国連の機能強化に正面から取り組む必要があります。改めて日本の国連、そして多国間主義への強いコミットメントを示すべく、本日私はここに国連の理念実現のための日本の決意を表明いたします。その内容は、まず第一に国連憲章の理念と原則に立ち戻るための安全保障理事会を含む国連の改革、そして軍縮不拡散を含めた国連自身の機能強化です。第二に国際社会における法の支配を推進する国連の実現です。第三に新たな時代における人間の安全保障の理念に基づく取り組みの推進です。議長、ご列席の皆様、安保理常任理事国であるロシアによるウクライナ侵略により、国連の信頼性が危機に陥っていることを直視しなければなりません。その信頼を回復するために、我々国連加盟国が行動しなければならない。これまでもしばしば安全保障理事会の機能不全が指摘されてきました。私たちはもう30年近くにもわたり、この問題について議論を重ねてきました。しかし、本当に必要なのは、議論のための議論ではなく、改革に向けた行動です。常任理事国の中にも、改革に向けた意欲を見せる国々があります。交渉なくして改革なし、さまざまな立場は交渉なくして妥協も修練もない。安全保障理事会の改革に向けて、文言ベースの交渉を開始する時です。2024年の未来サミットは、国連の在り方を幅広く見直す絶好の機会です。ぜひ有識者を含め、幅広い英知を結集し、機運を高めていきましょう。ロシアによる国際秩序の危機に対し、最も強い言葉でそれを遺憾とする総会決議の圧倒的多数による採択。その時、国連は闇夜の灯台のように国際社会の進むべき方向を明確に示すことができました。この総会こそが全加盟国を代表し、国際社会の大義がいずれにあるかを示す唯一の普遍的な機関です。日本は安全保障理事会の改革だけでなく、総会のさらなる活性化にも真剣に取り組み、国連全体が平和と安全の維持に一層大きな役割を果たせるよう後押しをしていく決意です。また日本は 幅広い国連の活動を支える事務総長を指示します。今般、ロシアが行ったような核兵器による威嚇、ましてや使用は国際社会の平和と安全に対する深刻な脅威であり、断じて受け入れることはできません。私は広島出身の総理大臣として、被爆者の方々の思いも胸に、核兵器のない世界の実現に向けて、並々ならぬ決意で取り組みを推し進めています。国際的な核軍縮・不拡散体制の礎である NPT 体制の維持及び強化に向けた世界が一体となった取り組みは、先月、ロシア1カ国の反対により合意を得るに至りませんでした。圧倒的多数の国々と同じく、私も深い無念を感じました。しかし、諦めてはいません。最終成果文書のコンセンサス採択まであと1カ国まで迫ることができたからです。同文書案が今後、国際社会が核軍縮に向けた現実的な議論を進めていく上での新たな土台を示しました。唯一の戦争被爆国であるという歴史的使命感を持って、日本は核兵器のない世界の実現に向けた決意を新たに現実的な取り組みを進めてまいります。長崎を最後の被爆地とせねばなりません。本年は小泉総理と金正日国防委員長が署名した日朝平壌宣言から20年です。同宣言に基づき、拉致、核、ミサイルといった諸懸案を包括的に解決し、不幸な過去を清算して国交正常化を目指す方針は不変です。日本は双方の関心事項について対話する準備があります。私自身、条件をつけずに金正恩委員長と向き合う決意です。あらゆるチャンスを逃すことなく全力で行動していきます。日本は平和構築の分野でも長期にわたり貢献してきました。1992年、カンボジアで初めて本格的に PKO ミッションに参加しました。それから30年、マリ、中央アフリカ、レバノンなどの現場でブルーヘルメットをかぶった多数のカンボジア隊員が平和と未来を守っています。ティアウ・シャンルティ中佐は日本による PKO 訓練の後、レバノンに派遣された一人です。その後、カンボジア軍の PKO 訓練センターで後進の指導に当たるなど、平和の担い手として活躍されています。日本の PKO への貢献を通じて生まれた平和の灯火が世代を超え、国境を越えて広がっていくのです。日本はそれを支援します。議長、ご列席の皆様、次に日本は国際社会における法の支配を推進する国連の実現に尽力します。法の支配は特定の国、特定の地域の独占物ではありません。脆弱な国にとってこそ法の支配は重要であることを思い起こすべきです。国際法に基づいた法の支配を強化していくことが長期的に見ればすべての国に裨益し、持続的な成長と健全な国際社会の発展につながります。このような信念のもと、日本は各国と協力しながら自由で開かれたインド太平洋実現をはじめ、さまざまな分野において積極的な役割を果たしてきました。1970年、国連総会は厳しい対立を粘り強い対話により乗り越え、友好関係原則宣言を採択しました。先人たちの知恵の結晶である この宣言は、今日においても法の支配を促進するための基本的原則を導き出す基盤です。この宣言からは、力による支配を脱却し、国際法の誠実な遵守を通じた法の支配を目指すこと、特に力や威圧による領域の現状変更の試みは決して認めないこと、国連憲章の原則の重大な違反に対抗するために協力することという基本的原則が浮かび上がってきます。これらの基本的原則こそ、分断の深刻化が懸念される目下の国際社会をつなぎ合わせ、人権尊重と持続可能な開発を達成するための基礎となるものであると確信をします。日本は来年1月から安全保障理事会の非常任理事国となります。大きな声だけでなく、小さな声にも真摯に耳を傾けながら、国際社会における法の支配を強化するべく行動する考えです。議長、ご列席の皆様、日本は新たな時代における人間の安全保障の理念に基づく取り組みを強化してまいります。人々が不安と恐怖から解放され、質の高い生活を送る人間の安全保障の理念は変わりませんが、我々は今、歴史的な分水嶺に立ち、新たな挑戦に直面をしています。今日、パンデミックに加え、他国への武力の行使や威圧、食料やエネルギー安全保障、インフレや気候変動などの問題が相互に結びつき、これまでになく多くの人々の安全が脅かされ、貧困と疾病が深刻化しています。誰一人として取り残さない社会を目指す SDGs、その達成のためにも、新たな時代における人間の安全保障の実現が求められています。その際、重要なのは、個人、社会、そして国家のそれぞれが時代の変化と挑戦に対応するためのレジリエンスを高めることです。ウガンダのエジュマニ県は、周辺諸国から難民の流入増大、ウクライナ情勢による物価高騰など、困難かつ複合的な課題に直面しています。今日の世界が直面する挑戦の一例です。同県の行政官、モイニ・フレッドさんは、JICA の研修で難民、自国民双方の意見を取り入れて行政を進めていくノウハウを学びました。アジュマニ県は、自分たちも経済的に苦しい中で難民支援を止めることなく行政運営を続けており、フレッドさんは民族、国籍の対立のない地域づくりのために奔走しています。国際社会の秩序が揺らぎ、人々の不安が高まる中、日本は人間の安全保障信託基金を通じた取り組み促進も通じ、国連とともに新たな時代における人間の安全保障の実現を進めます。また、人への投資を惜しみなく実践していきます。本年8月の TICAD8 でも、私は人への投資を重視しつつ、アフリカに今後3年間で官民総額300億ドル規模の資金の投入を行うことを表明したところです。アフリカ以外の世界各地でも、日本は人材育成や能力構築に力を入れます。私は、教育は平和の礎という信念のもと、教育チャンピオンに就任し、国連教育変革サミットの成果も踏まえ、人間人づくり協力を進めます。新型コロナ、パンデミックは人々の健康と 疾病から人を守る取り組みの重要性を示しました。日本はCOVAX等を通じたワクチン関連支援を含め、総額50億ドルの新型コロナ対策を進め、グローバルファンドに対し、次の3年間で最大 10.8 億ドルを新たに拠出することを決定しました。日本は来年主催する G7 に向け、国際保健の枠組み強化や、新型コロナを踏まえた新たな時代のユニバーサルヘルスカバレッジ達成にも引き続きリーダーシップを発揮します。食料安全保障のための緊急支援と食料システムのレジリエンス強化支援、国際電気通信連合等の取り組みを通じた情報通信分野での国際標準規格づくりなど、日本は人々が安心して質の高い生活を享受できる環境づくりへの支援も着実に実施しています。また、こうした取り組みを進めるためにも、日本は開発協力政策の基本方針である開発協力大綱を改定します。私は国際社会が抱える現在と将来の諸課題への対応を我々のコモンアジェンダとして示したグテーレス事務総長のリーダーシップを支持します。歴史が大きく変わりつつある今、日本は新たな時代における人間の安全保障の理念の下で、世界中の苦しむ人々を支えます。法の支配に基づく国際秩序に支えられた平和と安定の維持に向け、国連及び各国と力を合わせて取り組んでいきます。議長、ご列席の皆様、歴史の分水嶺に立つ今だからこそ、日本は国連に対する強い期待を持ち続けます。時代は変われど変わらないもの、それは国連の理念と原則です。私はその確信を持って皆さんと共に国連の強化に向けた道のりを歩んでいく決意であります。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
En nombre de la Asamblea, deseo agradecer al primer ministro de Japón la declaración que...
Excellency Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. I request protocol to kindly escort His Excellency. I